just so you can see it in his own words. And by the way, if you're interested in Nietzsche's work, I highly recommend Beyond Good and Evil, a great place to start, that emphasizes a lot of these ideas I'm talking to you about today. So Nietzsche says, "Perhaps the day will come when concepts of God and sin, which are the most solemn concepts of all and have caused the most fighting and suffering, will seem no more important to us than a child's toy and a child's pain seem to an old man." This is the future that Nietzsche envisions. He sees a time when we look back on our beliefs now with the same sort of quaint view that we look back today on previous beliefs. So for example, can you imagine if a senator went in the United States Senate went in and instead of swearing his hand on the Bible, he took out a book of Greek mythology and said, I want to give this up for Poseidon, god of the sea? He would get laughed off the stage. And yet, what's the difference between Poseidon and Zeus and God of the Bible or God of the Quran? Nietzsche would say there's no difference. They're both just mythology in his view. So in the same way we look back and laugh at the fact that people believed in Zeus, people in the future might look back at us and laugh at the fact that we believed in God at all, right? And that's the crucial thing to see. And it's hard for us to see outside of our historical circumstance because, of course, people in the Greek times, they didn't think it was silly to believe in Zeus, right? They would have, if you didn't believe in Zeus, they probably thought you were weird in a lot of cases. But now we look back and say, how silly. Nietzsche says, maybe we're going to look back at the whole idea of God and sin in the same way and think it was silly. And Nietzsche thinks that that's a good thing because he thinks that these ideas, as you can see in that quote, are causing a lot of suffering and problems in society, and we need to get rid of them. So this chipping away at God, Nietzsche sees, and at all religious values is a necessary process for us to move on to the next level, for us to advance to the next stage of humanity. And by the way, the meaning of that book title, Beyond Good and Evil, is just that. It's the idea of moving humans beyond the ideas we've previously had of good and evil. It's moving humans to the next stage beyond our primitive conception of sin and salvation and, going to heaven and going to hell. Nietzsche thinks those are primitive beliefs that are holding us back that need to be chipped away. And so he's happy that they're gradually being chipped away. Where does this all lead us? Well, it leads us to that Übermensch stage, to that next advancement of humanity. And Nietzsche thinks we can't get there until we have discarded the old stuff and until the driftwood is completely erased. We can't really fully advance. But Nietzsche considers himself a prophet because he sees a time when we will advance this way, when humans will rise up and they'll stop using traditional appeals and they'll stop just following the same religion and the same beliefs as their parents. And we'll work together to create a better world. We'll work together to create this new, higher evolved person, higher evolved human. And this is, again, I want to emphasize, this is the overcoming of good and evil, moving beyond. It's transcending good and evil. It's not creating a new good and evil. It's transcending the entire systems that we've had before to a whole new way of looking at the world. And this is the Overman. This is the Superman. Sometimes it's translated as Superman. It's the Übermensch, right? Moving beyond morality itself. So a number of questions arise here about the Übermensch. So if all values have been erased, if the Jenga piece has shattered on the ground, the Jenga puzzle is shattered on the ground, and our values are just strewn about, and we don't know what to do, will that just lead to pure chaos? Will that just lead all hell to break loose? Or will it lead us to have a temporary stage of chaos, and then as people become more advanced and have more strength, will we be able to build together as over men and over women a new society where we're all sort of on an equal footing? Nobody knows. And Nietzsche hints that it would be the latter. But he doesn't. Like I said, he admitted himself that he was a prophet here. He didn't know what would come next. He just saw a trend that something would come. Now, I like to think about this in terms of Frank Castle versus Jesus. I know that's a strange comparison, but if any of you have watched The Punisher, you know that Frank Castle is sort of this incredibly adept military guy who will, take anybody down, but he also has a very strong moral code for particular people that he sees as innocent and he sees as good. So would the Overman, but at the same time, he kills a bunch of people. So would the Overman be someone like him who thinks he's good but still goes around kind of behaving like a criminal because he thinks he's above everyone? Or would the Overman actually be more somebody like Jesus? Would we all be like, Jesus? Would an Overman actually lead us to be more compassionate? Is a more highly evolved, developed being, like we might say the Buddha or Jesus or Muhammad, are they just by nature more compassionate and more, because they're more advanced, does that lead them to have a greater appreciation for life and other people? And again, it's really an open question, because we certainly have not reached the stage of the Übermensch yet, if we ever will reach it, that Nietzsche envisioned. Now, Nietzsche did have a couple of metrics for helping us think about what sort of values would the Overman have. So if Nietzsche is telling us that the Overman and the more evolved human creates his own values, what sorts of values would they be? And again, Nietzsche was a prophet, so he just made predictions. But because he loved art so much, he said, well, one thing is that a human would see, an Overman would see his own life as a work of art. He would develop himself as though he's a canvas to be painted upon. He wouldn't think that he has some plan given to him by God or some plan from his family to become a doctor. He would see his life as an open canvas, and he would see himself as the sculpture to be created in different ways. That's why he would experiment with different perspectives and find ways to live artistically in whatever way that means for him. So that's one thing to think about. But Nietzsche gives us a thought experiment that he's not unique for creating this thought experiment. It's been part of other religious belief systems, including in, I believe, Hinduism and Buddhism. But it's this idea of eternal recurrence of the same. And so Nietzsche asks us to consider a thought experiment. Basically, imagine if you had to live your life over and over and over again for an infinite amount of times. And you would know each new time that you were living the same life, but you would have to live it in the same way, right? So you'd have an awareness that you had lived the life before, but you wouldn't have an ability to change it, right? So just go with that for the sake of the argument, for the sake of the thought experiment. What would you do? Right? In other words, would you be sad? Would you cry and wail and moan and bemoan your fate and say, why do I have to live this over and over? Would it be like playing a bad video game again and again and again? Or would you say, you know what? I love my life so much that I welcome living it again and again and again. I'll be in eternal paradise because my life is so good that it'll just repeat again and again and again. Now, Nietzsche said that a true Overman, and he used a Latin phrase here to emphasize it, amor fati, love your fate. Nietzsche said a true Overman would be someone who welcomes eternal recurrence, who wants to live his life over and over again. If you truly love your life, as an Overman would, you would welcome eternal recurrence. So that reminds us that another value an Overman would have is just pure joy at existence, right? Pure joy at being alive. Going back to Buddhism, some level of constant enlightenment, constant happiness at your own ability to be on this planet and to just be here at all. So, although we don't know specifically what would happen in the realm of an Overman, we have some guesses, and Nietzsche had some guesses as well.